Lots of stuff is going on right now around the International Court of Justice in The Hague. So maybe it's a good idea to just look at what some of the consequences might be of this trial of South Africa versus Israel over Palestine. Let's talk about the ICC and the Hague Invasion Act, shall we? Did you know there was something called the Hague Invasion Act? The Hague Invasion Act. This is absolutely crazy. But the Hague Invasion Act, officially known as the Active Servicemen Protection Act, it's a law which was passed in the US in 2002 already. And this law basically states that the US should be allowed to invade the Netherlands, which, by the way, is supposed to be an ally of the US because they're both in NATO, if any American citizen or any American soldier or any American politician or any allied, that is allied to the US person, should ever be brought before the International Criminal Court in The Hague, in the Netherlands. So let's just recap this, shall we? Let's just recap this. The US Senate passed a law in 2002 which said that they will invade the Netherlands, which is their NATO ally, if any American or allied person is brought before the International Criminal Court on charges of war crimes or crimes against humanity, and they will then be free to invade the Netherlands. This is what this law said. I'm not making this up, but this is what this law said. This is what this law said. This is crazy. This is insane. Because first of all, you have to know what the ICC does, eh? The ICC is it's like, what's going on with the ICJ right now? The ICC is the same thing, a UN tribunal, but for people, not countries. The ICJ deals with countries, not people. The ICC deals with people, not countries, right? So if basically the ICJ now would conclude that Israel is actually committing genocide against the Palestinian people, which they might very well do in like a year or so, then the ICC could then, or at least should then even, open up its own investigation, issue arrest warrants, international arrest warrants, for Israeli war criminals like the president of the country, Herzog, or the prime minister of the country, Netanyahu, and they would then be able to be arrested if they, for instance, visit any country in Europe or any country in the world, really. They would then be arrested and be shipped to The Hague to stand trial for the crimes that were committed by them or under their responsibility. I mean, that's how it works. But in that case, if that would happen, then Israel could basically ask the US to invade The Hague and attack the ICC to break out any Israelis or Americans who are held there on charges of war crimes or crimes against humanity. That is what this law says. It actually states this explicitly. This law, the Hague Invasion Act, which already passed in the US in 2002, explicitly states that the US is forbidden by this law to actually cooperate with the ICC, which is insane if you think about this. And 2, the President of the US is allowed to authorize the invasion of another so-called ally, to attack the ICC and to invade The Hague and to free any Americans or allied suspects of war crimes and crimes against humanity who might be on trial there, who might be held there for trial. Now you have to ask yourself, first of all, how did this law get passed, seeing that these two countries are supposed to be allies in NATO, right? How? Second of all, also, why exactly did the Americans feel that this was necessary? Why? Think about this. Because let's be completely clear about this. The point of the ICC is to investigate war crimes and crimes against humanity. Now the US from the very beginning said we don't want to cooperate with the ICC. We don't want to help the ICC in any way. We're even hostile to the ICC. We will attack the ICC if the ICC ever goes against Americans or people who are helping America. That's what they said. Now you have to ask yourself, why do they feel the need to do this? Might it be because American lawmakers actually know very well that the American government commits war crimes all the time, and the U.S. armed forces commit crimes against humanity all the time? I mean, for goodness sake, we saw this in Iraq, right? And not just Iraq, we saw this in Iraq, and before that Vietnam and Afghanistan, of course, and Syria, and in Somalia, and all around the world, and in South America, and in Middle America, and basically in Africa, and everywhere around the world. These people, where the Americans go, they commit horrible, horrible, horrible crimes, all in the name of American power, basically, you know, because nobody should ever stop following the land of the free and the brave, right? So you have to ask yourself, why is the US so afraid, so terribly, terribly afraid that Americans might be brought before the ICC? Because if the American armed forces and the American government would actually just act like, I don't know, normal people and say, oh, but we're not going to commit war crimes, we're not going to commit crimes against humanity because this is alien to us, this is against our morality, this is against our philosophy, this is against our humanity, then the US wouldn't be bothered by the ICC. But they are bothered by the ICC. They actually want to attack the ICC. That's what they said. That this is what the Hague Invasion Act actually says. The Active Service Members Protection Act, what they call this. This is what it says. We will attack another country, our own ally, if they put people on trial who deserve it. And it gets worse though, because don't forget as well that there is a real chance right now. A real chance that Israelis will end up before the ICC. There's already a case pending in the ICC against Israel, against the Israeli leadership right now. It's being investigated right now. And when the verdict comes in from the ICJ that a genocide is actually being committed in Gaza right now, and that verdict might very well come in. That might actually be what the ICJ will say, because don't forget that they've already ordered provisional measures. Provisional measures, by the way, that Israel is completely ignoring. And the fact that they've ordered provisional measures means that they believe there is a plausibility that genocide is committed right now. It's already plausible according to the proof that they've seen. If it's plausible, then they might very well, in like a year time or a month's time or whatever, this takes a while, but in a year time, let's say, they might very well come to the conclusion that yes, a genocide is actually being committed against the people in Gaza, which means that the Israeli leadership is responsible, which means that the Israeli leadership might very well end up before the ICC in The Hague, which in turn might very well result in the Israeli government requesting the American government to liberate the Israelis in The Hague, which will then in turn mean that the US will attack The Hague, which means that the Dutch government and Dutch military will have to defend The Hague against the Americans, and the rest of NATO and Europe will also then, I guess, have to fight the Americans, because the NATO member is being attacked, of course, by another NATO member in this case. So you see that this is a dangerous, slippery slope that we're on right now. You see that this is not something I'm making up. This is not like a paranoid fantasy. This is actually law. And from this we can also see clearly how evil the US government really is. How evil, how deeply wrong the US government is. Wherever Americans go, And wherever the American military goes, wherever the American government goes, crimes are being committed. Crimes against other people, crimes against their own people. They are completely unethical. And it bothers me, as a European, which I am, and as a Dutchman, which I also am, that my own government, both in the Netherlands and in Europe, continue to follow the Yanks blindly. Whatever the US says, whatever Washington says, Europe does. I mean, that's how it works. Washington says this, and Europe follows. Even though the US government has already announced their hostility to Europe. So this is what we need to do. This is what we need to do. Frankly, first of all, we need to kick out all the US embassies in Europe until they actually repeal this law. Because it's ridiculous that you declare war on another country and you're still allowed to stay in that country. This is stupid. That's one. And second of all, we really need to kick the US government and the US military especially out of Europe. There are still thousands upon thousands upon thousands of American soldiers in Europe right now, which are allowed to be there by their governments, especially in Germany, especially in Italy, but not just. Also in the Netherlands, also in Belgium, lots of them in Belgium as well, also in Spain, also they're all over the place. And we need to get rid of them because they are a danger and a menace. Americans are a menace. Just like Russia is a menace, just like China is a menace, America is also a menace. I'm not going to pick sides in one for one superpower against the other. No, I'm not going to do that, eh? No. I am saying this. You do not follow a country that has declared war on you. You do not blindly obey a country that has openly declared war on you, that has said we are going to invade you. You don't. So it's time to do something about the evil of the United States, the so-called land of the free.